Why do we give what we give, and does it really help? With more on that, we're joined tonight in New York, New York, by Mara Einstein. She is author of Compassion Incorporated, How Corporate America Blurs the Line Between What We Buy, Who We Are, and Those We Help. And with us back here in studio, Imam Shabir Ali, president of the Islamic Information and Dawah Center, Dave Toyson, president and CEO of World Vision Canada, and Simon Parcher, president of Humanist Canada. And it's good to have you three here in the studio. And Mara, we welcome you from New York City to our broadcast tonight. I want to start by just having all of you tell us from your various and different faith perspectives the tradition of charity as it relates to each of your faiths. And Dave, why don't we start with you?
Sure.
The notion of charitable giving from a Christian point of view.
Right. Well, I think it's very clear, probably the strongest Christian teaching would be Jesus says you can't love God. You can't love God unless you're willing to love your neighbor or love your brother and sister. So it's clearly a commandment. The two other principles for me, and this comes, I think, out of the Hebrew Scriptures as well. The first thing, the idea is our giving comes out of the idea that God created us and gave us the gift of life. And then secondly, from a Christian perspective, the idea that God would die, that Jesus would die in order to rescue us is a profound gift as well. And so our giving comes out of a gratefulness for God's gift to us. And then alongside that, you can put in, there's issues around justice. That's part of the tradition, that there be equality, there be generosity. Probably one of the things that's a bit, I think, somewhat unique in the Christian scriptures is this idea where Jesus talks about it isn't enough just to give, but where's your heart? And then later in the Christian epistles, it talks about, do you in fact give with generosity, with a willing heart?
So it's not enough to give. That
Right.
$1,000 check, that's not enough just to write that check.
Right.
Your heart's got to be in the right place when you write that check.
So it's this idea of a command, but at the same time, it has to come from your heart. That's what avoids, I think, legalism. For me, a little anecdote. I was in Albania during the Kosovo, all the fighting that was going on, and I was in a refugee center. It was a little Kosovo 10-year-old boy. They were all crowded together in this gymnasium, and the kids had been given some chocolate wrapped in tinfoil. This little boy, when a soldier had come by from the other side, had broken his arm. And so I was interviewing the family, and then as it came to a conclusion, I noticed he unwrapped the tinfoil, he broke the chocolate in half, and then he handed it to me. And I just stopped for a moment. That's charity, that's giving.
That's a serious moment.
Yeah.
Okay, Mara, let's go to you in New York City and tell us, if you would, from the Jewish perspective, how does charity relate to Jewish teaching?
Well, you talk about Jewish teachings, what you're really talking about is something known as tzedakah. And tzedakah is the word for charity. And it's very similar, actually, to the Christian tradition in that you're supposed to, by old tradition, give 10% of your income to charitable works. But fundamental to the understandings of Jewish tradition as it relates to charity is this idea, one, that you do it anonymously. It's not about creating grandeur for yourself, but to donate and not have anybody know that you've given the money to anybody else. And to do some kind of charitable works such that you leave the world a better place than it was when you got here. That's really fundamental to the Jewish tradition.
Okay, Shabir Ali from the Islamic tradition.
Well, it's interesting that Mara mentioned the word sadaqah, because in the Arabic language we have the word sadaqah, which is the word used for giving charity in the Islamic tradition. The Quran speaks a lot about sadaqah, or about charity. In one passage in the second chapter of the Quran, it says they ask you what they should give. Tell them, give what is excess. And this is reflected on the day of the Eid, following the breaking of the fast at the end of the month of Ramadan, when every person is required to give one meal for a person. And who is required? Anyone who has in excess of his or her needs for the day. Other passages encourage giving and promise great reward in the life hereafter for those who give here. God in the Quran assures believers that whatever they give will be returned to them. either in this life or by way of reward in the life hereafter. Sometimes it is promised that one will get 10 times that in reward. And in one passage, the implication is that one will get 700 times the reward. In any case, one is encouraged to give not for the reward, but simply for seeking the face of God, wajhullah, as it is mentioned in the Arabic text.
But clearly the sense is you give and it comes back.
And, well, yes, in some way or another, you will get it back. God will give it back to you. You lose nothing by giving in charity. But in any case, you give that for the pleasure of God, not seeking any reward or name or fame. One passage of the Quran describes the believers as those who feed the poor, the needy, and the captives, and they express the sentiment that we do this not for any thanks from you, the recipient, but only by way of seeking the pleasure of God.
Simon, I don't know if we can call atheism a religion, but you believe in it, if I can use that expression. And I wonder whether there is a long-standing charitable view within the tradition of atheism.
Well, humanism, actually. And humanism is a secular life stance. It's rooted in naturalistic philosophy, science, compassion, and ethics. Now, the goal of humanism is that every human being, both individually and collectively, would live the very best life possible. Now, you mentioned atheism, and of course, humanists are atheists as well. And that sort of goes hand in hand. Now, philanthropy, the objective of that is to improve the quality of human life. So it's virtually the same as humanism, or at least it goes hand in hand. Now, if you break it down etymologically, philanthropy means philos, which is love, and anthropos, which means human beings. So it's the love of humanity.
So you give, you love your fellow human being.
Exactly.
That's the gist of it. I want to follow up on something that I have heard in the past, and I want to confirm here at this table. Dave, you say it's important not just to give, but you've got to give from the heart. And I have heard in the Jewish tradition that there are these, as Mara described them, varying degrees of giving. The highest form of giving is to give anonymously. It's a little less impressive if you give and you want your name on a building, that kind of thing. But I want to know what the higher form of giving is, according to Christianity. If I write a check for $100,000, but my heart's not in it, I'm a super rich guy and I'm not going to miss the money, or that little story you just told us about that little kid who gave you a piece of chocolate, but man, that was from the heart, it was the last thing in the world he owned. What's considered a more valuable form of charity in Christianity?
Well, I suppose I'm drawn to the story that Jesus told. All the people were lined up to make their contribution. And then it says one man was very wealthy and made a big point of it. And then there was a little woman, widow, and all she had, the language is one mite, less than 1 penny. And Jesus made the point of saying that her gift was the greatest of all. So I would say there's a bias, I would think, and I don't think this is unique to Christianity. I think it's about sacrifice. I think that's the other thing you have to talk about, is the gift. What's the level of sacrifice that has influenced, because it's a leveler. So it doesn't mean then how much your amount was. It means how much did you have to begin with and what portion, or what is it from yourself that you're giving. I suppose the greatest gift of all is when someone gives their life.
Right.
Think of people who've taken a bullet or whatever else for someone else. We say that's the highest gift that there could be.
Let me take a step back, though, and not the gift of life, but, and Mara, I'll get you on this. How does, given that same option, somebody's going to write a check for $1 million, somebody's going to offer $1, but the dollar is absolutely from the heart. The $1 million, the guy's a billionaire, he can take it or leave it. According to Judaism, which is the more valuable gift to offer?
Well, I'm not an expert on Judaism, so I'm not sure I'm exactly the person to comment on that. But what I can say from a perspective, more of a traditional, maybe even a humanist perspective on all of this, is that the whole point in charity and philanthropy is to focus on the person who is being served by the philanthropy. It's not about the person who's giving the money. It's about the person who's being served. It's about the person who's being helped, and that's where the focus needs to be.
If that's the case,
it should be far
then
less on the person who's giving the money.
well, okay. I think you're pointing out that it's a difference of opinion here then, because if it's about the person who's on the receiving end, the $1 million is going to go further than the loony. Fair enough, Dave?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so, I mean, I don't think there's one easy answer, but I guess from my perspective, I still think it's important. Of course, we're focusing on the person who needs help, but it's kind of the outside mission and the inside mission. And the inside mission is about sacrifice, in my view. And I think that has to be admired.
Imam Ali, is there a view in Islam?
Well, I was going to say to this point that there is a sort of an open overlap here as well, in that just as Dave appreciated so much receiving that piece of chocolate that he didn't need, what he appreciated is the thought behind that simple act of giving. The Quran describes the believers as those who give in times of ease and in times of hardship. So some people say hard times we can't give, but the Quran says the believers will give even in hard times. And even more so, another passage says they prefer others above themselves, even though they themselves are struck with poverty. So even the poor people are required to give. Give of something, whatever you have. It may be something that you make with your own hands out of very simple discarded materials. A little card that you put together and you say on it, "I love you." It's a charitable act to someone else. The smile on the person's face, according to a Muslim tradition attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, is an act of charity itself. And the Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said that you cannot be a believer until you love for your brother that which you love for yourself. So I think it needs to be seen both ways. Yes, from the point of view of the recipient, the $1 million or $100,000 is worth much more and is even necessary. But the recipient may also appreciate that act of love that comes from the sincerity of the giver, even though the gift may be very small.
Okay, let's move on here, and let me pose this question to our audience watching at home. Who do you think's more charitable? People who are religious or people who are not? I know the folks at this table think they know the answer to this. And StatsCan has a view on this as well. Here's Statistics Canada, which, Mara, is our kind of national statistics gathering operation. And, well, they've got it here. Religiously active people are more inclined, they have found, to donate, and on average, they make larger donations. In the year 2010, 93% of religiously active people gave money to one or more charitable or nonprofit organizations. Their average annual donation was north of $1,000. By comparison, 83% of donors who attended religious services less often or not at all, on average, donated just north of $300 annually. So, Simon, are religious people more charitable?
It would appear to be the case, but it actually is not the case.
Okay, go ahead.
Religious people are charitable, and so
You're going to argue with StatsCan here, are you?
No, actually, I used to work at StatCan.
You did?
I just retired, actually.
From StatsCan?
Yes, yes.
So they got this wrong?
No, the numbers are correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is true. However, we have to look at why why is it true? What's causing these numbers to look like that? Or rather, what does it mean? What do the numbers mean? Now, I would say that first of all, they judged religiosity by how often you attend church or religious services once a week.
Religiously active people, meaning those who attend services at least once a week.
Now, it might be interesting for you to know that it was on September 12, 2011, there was a poll done Canada-wide that asked people if they believed in God or not. And 53% of people said they believed in God. That means that 47% likely did not. Now, these numbers are a bit higher than the numbers we usually get from StatsCan, but that's because StatsCan asked the question, what religion were you born into, not what do you believe today?
I see.
So that's why there's a difference. So they're kind of one generation behind. Now, in that same poll, okay, they asked people who went to church if they believed in God or not. And about a third of the people who attended church once a week or regularly did not believe in God. So therefore, that kind of
Say that again.
skews one third of the people who attended church
Once a
regularly.
week don't believe in God?
Yes, and these are the major religions, like Catholicism, Protestantism, and Judaism. And so one third attended church but did not believe in God. Therefore, it shows that just because you attend church, you don't necessarily believe in God. Now, if I may continue to say that, so if we even that out, you might find it's the same, that non-religious people are the same as religious people in that context. But in another context, religious people go to church once a week, and they hear about the needs of people, and they're asked to give money, and there's a plate passed by them. So religious organizations are very effective fundraisers. Now, when someone doesn't belong to an institution like that, when they're on their own, they don't get that encouragement every week to give money. So I think it's natural that there would be a 10% difference. But,
okay, stand by there,
yeah.
because I want to pick up on that.
Yeah.
So Dave, basically what he's saying is you guys are better at shaking down your customers than, than atheists are.
I think there's some truth to that, but I think it's still about what's the environment that's producing this greater level of generosity. I still think that's the issue. I'm not familiar with the survey about, so I really can't comment in terms of on the people not believing in God but going to church. It's a really interesting idea. But there's no, for example, the latest stats, and you've said this, but just to be specific, the average gift for Canadians is $550 a year. This is as of the people who said they gave one gift to charity over the last 12 months. And then roughly $641 come from the people on average from the faith side, and then $333 from people on the non-faith side. That's the way it breaks down based on this particular survey.
What do you think that says?
Well, first of all, I think it says, I think we have to be honest, those of us in the religious community, first of all, we know that a good chunk of that is going to the operations, and the ongoing work of the church, okay? It isn't necessarily humanitarian. It could go for proselytism, for example, but things that are part of the, quote, church activities. Another piece of it, of course, is going for humanitarian work or whatever through churches as well. So, but aside from that, it still seems to me that the level of generosity, I mean, I know secular organizations, for example, that will tell you that some of their most generous donors are people who've joined their organization for the cause. They realize it's secular, but they're great contributors as well. But I think it goes back to just the environment where you're encouraged on a regular basis to be generous. When I've written a book called The Power of Generosity, and I was looking at a church denomination study, and they asked what was the biggest impact on the giving within their church denomination. It wasn't the kids going to Sunday school, it wasn't the preacher preaching, it wasn't the songs, it was the behavior of their parents. That's the other factor in this, is how parents teach their children to be generous, because they're many more times likely to be generous themselves if they've been brought up in an environment where the parents are generous.
Mara, what do you infer from those numbers? The issue aside of whether or not people who believe in God go to church or synagogue.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting listening to this because they actually are very similar numbers in the United States. Mm-hmm. And what you find, and you have to look at the way that the survey is languaged, and they say nonprofit organizations. Well, of course, religious institutions are nonprofit organizations, and so a large chunk of that money is actually going to the churches. And again, so it's people passing around the plate, and that's where the money is then being funded through to the churches. And it really made me think about, one, in terms of the religious giving of people coming from their parents. Surveys have been done that show that if parents tithe to the church, that is, gave 10% to the church, their children are more likely to do that. And it's very rare that someone who grew up in a household that didn't tithe would then become a tithing household. That's very infrequently happens. But it made me chuckle a little bit because I began to think about the mega churches in the United States. And if you look at something like Joel Osteen's church, they spent $95 million dollars to turn a basketball stadium into a megachurch that could serve 48,000 people. Well, that money came from somewhere, but that was part of that nonprofit money, charitable money that was being collected by that institution.
He fills that
I don't know.
place
I
and-
guess you could call that charity or philanthropy. I don't know. I think it's kind of a broad term that way.
Well, we've so far been talking about, the charitable offering of money, but I guess one thing that we should talk about, Imam, is that people don't just give money to be charitable, they give time as well. You want to put a spin on that in this equation?
Yes, time is also very important. Of course, we say time is money, but time comes with that personal sort of commitment. It's easy for you to write, to use your example, the $100,000 check. Be sure to write it while we're still speaking. I'll take it with me. But can you give of your precious time? And time is, we only have a limited amount. All of us, and the rich and poor, still all have the same 24 hours in a day. If one sits down with a child in a public library just to help that child to read a book, that is not only the act of teaching the child to read, but is also teaching compassion. It is saying that you are so important to me that I'm willing to give of my precious time to sit down with you. So giving of time is also very important, and people who are donating large sums of money to philanthropic organizations should also donate some of their time to see how that money is being spent and to be personally involved in getting that the results and fulfilling the goals of that philanthropic organization.
Is it possible to say which is more valuable to give, time or money?
Of course, we can look at it from two different perspectives. From the perspective of the recipient, we want the money, right? From the perspective of the giver, it is important to be personally involved, and this is where the heart comes in. I mean, you asked previously about the difference between religious giving and non-religious giving. There is a philosophical world of difference here, because when a person of religion gives, one is giving here based on the philosophical construct that the philanthropy is built into the cosmos. It is not something that we invent. You see, for a humanist, it seems to me to decide that philanthropy is important. Let's love our fellow human beings. This is an adopted idea. In a similar way, you might say it is also adopted and taught in religion. But the way in which it is taught in religion is that this is built into the whole cosmos. God created the universe with us in it, as if from the Muslim perspective, as a test for us to see how we will respond to our fellow human beings. It is not something that we have, in a way, a choice about, that we're thinking, should we be generous, should we not be generous, should we love human beings or should we not? The whole idea of loving human beings, loving God's creation, loving animals, loving the environment and all of this, this is built into the cosmos based on the idea that God created the entire universe and us in it, and we have a responsibility back to God. So the time that we have, the 24 hours in a day, has to be partitioned so that we take care of our livelihood, and we also have some of that to give to philanthropic causes.
In which case, Mara Einstein, do you think religion is the original NGO of our world?
I suppose that it is, where people learn to give money based on their religious institutions. That's probably one of the first places all of us learn. And charity, and in synagogues they always have what's called mitzvah day. And mitzvah is when you do something good for someone. And every kid learns how to do some kind of charity. And this is not about money. This is about doing charitable works. And it's everything from collecting clothes to collecting food to putting little bags together for the homeless of little things of toothpaste and toothbrushes and soap and all of those sorts of things, and then giving those away to the homeless, and then kids going to elderly homes and spending time with the elderly and so on. And so it is certainly traditionally been a place where people did learn about charity. And unfortunately, I think there aren't a lot of places, particularly for really young people now, who aren't involved with religious institutions to find out how to begin to be charitable. It's a thing that people, certainly in Gen X and Gen Y, don't know a whole lot about.
Well, let me share some more stats with everybody here. These, once again, from your former employer, Statistics Canada. The year is 2010. That's the year for which we have the most recent figures. And again, as it relates to charity and faith, we asked the question, keeping the faith, In the United States and some European countries, religious organizations receive the largest share of the total value of donations. That's more than $4 billion in the year 2010. In Canada, 40% of the total value of donations goes to religious organizations, and that percentage is actually down 6% from the year 2007. Let's go around on this. Dave, what, if anything, does this reflect about how Canadians view faith-based principles of charitable giving?
Well, in terms of the decline, I think one of the big challenges we face in the Christian community, it'd be interesting, Shabir, you may have a comment on this from the Islamic community, but what we're seeing, for example, is church attendance is declining modestly, 1% or 2% every year, but that cumulatively matters a lot. And the other thing we're seeing is that it appears to be an increasing rejection of the institution, not necessarily believing in God, but they're rejecting the institution. And I think that's one of the changes that we're seeing. And so what you don't know is we've got a very activist, for example, youth culture today. I think from my perspective, they're more engaged in social issues than ever. But the question is, are they going to follow the oldest generation right now, which is the generous generation in Canada, no question about it. And so the big question is, as people migrate now, are the baby boomers going to pick up the slack? And then what's going to happen to, say, the millennial generation, who are eventually going to take up the place of Gen X? How are they going to handle this business? That's still a big question. My view is the biggest factor is life, your place in the life cycle. When you're single, not married, for example, no children, your jobs are mobile, you're less, we know, for example, they give less. But then once, if you get married or you have children, all things start to change. So the question becomes, are they going to follow the same model that's gone ahead of them, or is this going to be a generation that's different? And I think that's a concern to us in the faith community, that our young people, are we losing our young people?
Shabir Ali, your view on that?
Well, in the Muslim community, we have had the pendulum swinging two ways on this question. One is that after 9/11, a lot of questions have been raised about Muslim organizations collecting funds for charitable purposes, sending those funds overseas to help poor people, and then eventually those funds get transferred into the hands of someone who is linked with some questionable activity. And then it comes back to us here. Sometimes an organization is closed, its charitable status is revoked, and so on. Now, that has a rippling effect throughout the community, in that many people now are hesitant to give, not knowing if they give to an organization, where is this money going to end up, and will that eventually get my name blacklisted somewhere? At the same time, with the events following 9/11, many Muslims began to question their commitment to the faith community. And though they may remain Muslims privately, they may cease coming to the public places of Muslim assembly. But on the other hand, we see, and this is where the pendulum swings the other way, we see some people becoming even more devoted to their faith, because they feel that their faith is being challenged from the outside, and they have to defend it from the inside. And the best way of defending it is to become better practitioners themselves, to reflect that generosity and philanthropy that should be a mark of our faith. And so they're coming to the mosques more, and they're also giving more. At the same time, the Muslim organizations are more careful about where they send money, and most would prefer to use their charitable funds for local causes. And in fact, this is one of the principles of our religious teaching, because it is mentioned in a tradition that when the Prophet Muhammad sent one of his associates to a certain town, he told him, you're going to those people, tell them that it is an obligation for the rich to contribute towards the benefit of the poor. But it is the money should be taken from their rich and given to their poor. The wording of this has made it a principle in the Islamic faith that the zakat, or the charity that is collected, previously I used the word sadaqah, and here another term, zakat, that should be distributed or redistributed in the same area from which it was initially collected.
So we have a responsibility to take care of our own, if I can put it that way.
At least as a first point of entry, charity beginning at home.
Okay. Well, Simon, let me follow up with this then. We've seen the connection between giving and religion. You don't have a religion. So what motivates non-religious people to give? Because clearly it's not keeping the four walls of the church or the mosque or the synagogue up.
Well, actually, I agree with Shabir in the sense that I think we kind of don't have a choice to be generous in a way. Not because God made us like that, but because, in my opinion, we evolved like that over time. Now, and that's just the way human beings are. Now, if we go back anthropologically and sociologically, we know that at one point in time, Homo sapiens coexisted with Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and another species that was very similar to Homo sapiens. Now, in Northern Europe, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals both lived there for a period. And somehow the Neanderthals went extinct and the Homo sapiens didn't. And here we are. Now, there is a theory that because Homo sapiens were more social and more caring about one another, that is what enabled them to survive. So,
So that's what motivates non-religious people.
If that's true, then we have evolved to be caring for survival.
But you see, this is the problem, Simon, in that if you have that as your underlying philosophy, then basically what you're saying is that those who are generous because they evolved to be generous, and those who are not generous just simply evolved not to be generous. And those who have evolved to be generous, they are responding to that generosity with which they have evolved, not as a selfless act of giving, but as a further contributor to the further survival of the individual who is giving. So this can never be a selfless act. If altruism or even philanthropy, you define that as the love for fellow human beings, if that love for fellow human beings is something that just simply you evolved with and that helps your survival, and you're continuing with that, then it's not a selfless act of giving. So that makes it different. I'm not saying less important, but it makes it different from the religious motivation for giving, where the religious person is saying, look, whether I like it or not, God created me and gave this wealth in my possession, and I just have to give it, and all creatures are God's creatures. Everyone is God's creatures, and so I love them because of the love of God. Not because I was evolved to love them, but because I want to deliberately love them, and I want to deliberately be generous.
You want a quick comeback on that, Simon?
Yes. Well, when I say evolved, that doesn't diminish the fact that that's the way we are. We are generous people. We are generous beings. And it is different from the religious perspective, yes. And I don't personally believe that we necessarily have to be altruistic to be generous. And I don't think it diminishes the effect of being generous if we get something from giving. And I think we do get something from giving, if nothing else, other than that it feels good to give.
Yes. That it does. Let me get a new issue on the table here if I can. And Mary, I'll bring you in at this point. I want to talk about marketing, because we are seeing, of course, a greater proportion of charitable giving going to secular organizations, and we're seeing a variety of new ways in which those organizations, through modern marketing techniques, try to get people to give. And Mary, you've got a book on this, Compassion, Inc., where you argue that corporate America is blurring a line between consumerism and charity. Lay out that thesis for us, if you would.
Well, what I looked at, what brought me to this idea was I saw Bono on Oprah Winfrey, actually, in 2006, and he was introducing Product Red, which was a campaign that took into account the Gap, and most people know it in terms of the Gap t-shirt that says inspired, and the RED is in the parentheses. But what happened with that campaign is they brought a number of different companies into the fold, such as Motorola and the Gap and Apple, and had them create red products, and then a certain percentage of the money would then go to the Global Fund. And when I originally saw that, I thought it was a great idea. People are already spending money. Why not take a certain percentage of that money and have it go to charity? Seemed like a great idea. But when I began to look at what's known as cause-related marketing, which is when a corporation uses a charity as a means to sell the product, I found that it wasn't quite as above board as it appears to be. In particular, what happens is that a charity may present a particular product and say, you go buy this bracelet and we'll donate up to $50,000 to Breast Cancer Research Foundation. Well, they'll tell you that they're donating the money, but they won't tell you when that $50,000 cap has been reached. So what I saw in my research was that more and more these kinds of charitable institutions were being used as a way to sell consumer products. Getting back to the point of what you were talking about around the table specifically, is this idea of how are these charities being used for people, and how are they beginning to think about charity? And specifically what I mean about that is that charities became a means for consumers to justify buying very expensive consumer products. So I could feel good about buying a red Nano because I know $10 is going to the Global Fund. And I don't think that that's what charity should really be about.
Well, but
I
if
also
we can,
talk- yeah.
if we can turn let's call it a self-centered act of shopping into something that benefits a charitable organization at the end of the day, how's that a bad thing?
Well, we don't know that the money is actually going to the charitable organizations. That's one thing. The other thing is that you may think that you're donating money, and you may in fact not be donating money. I'll give you an example from my own personal experience on that one. I needed dishwashing liquid, and I went to the store and I happened to see Dawn dishwashing liquid, which had a very big picture of a sea lion on the cover, and on the cover of the packaging, and it had a huge $1. And so I thought, okay, I need dishwashing liquid anyway. I'll pay for this, and $1 will go to help these poor sea lions. And it wasn't until I actually cleaned out the bottle that I saw in little teeny tiny type that I actually had to go online and input a code that was on the bottle to trigger that donation. So while I thought I was donating money, while I thought I was being a good charitable person, in fact, I hadn't donated any money to the charity at all.
Interesting. And even, Dave, if it does go according to Hoyle, does it contradict the earlier religious principles we talked about namely, giving without an expectation of something in return?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the motivation for a lot of this, aside from the profit motive, obviously for profit companies, but there's also a sense in which we're trying to get every stakeholder, somebody you can have a contribution to make, to say, use the example of poverty, bring them all to the table and try to find out, is there something we could do in common that will make a difference? Which I think actually is a laudable thing. Because we have so much charity work, for example, there's no strategy to it. It's just one-off stuff. So this stakeholder idea, I think, is really powerful. But I think the downside, and I think Mara has said it well, is that, but we must be careful that we don't cheapen the whole idea. In other words, does the ends justify the means? And so I think for those of us especially, I think doing, say, I don't know, more longer-term traditional charity work, we don't want to give people the sense that somehow buying the right shampoo because it'll do this is somehow comparable, say, in our case, making a commitment of over $500 a year to sponsor a child and to work with that child and in their community to make a difference and be there for 15 years.
Right.
I mean, you're not talking about the same thing here.
But
so
do you feel that impression is being given right now in some
I think
respect?
sometimes that is, and yet, as I say, I'm reluctant to say it's all bad because I think there's some advantages to it.
Let me try this. Yeah, go ahead, Mara.
Yeah, I want to say that I don't have fundamentally a problem with charities working with corporations, and there's actually a lot of corporations working with charities that are doing good work and have done good work over long periods of time. But that's something that's known as social innovation as opposed to cause marketing, and it specifically embeds those ideas of the charity into the corporation so that they can do good works. And let me give you a particular example on that. One corporation, actually Levi's, has come up with a brand called Waterless, and it's a brand of jeans that uses significantly less water than a traditional pair of jeans, which typically takes 3,000 liters of water to produce. And so they reduced how much water they use in creating this particular pair of jeans, which fundamentally has a better impact on the environment. At the same time, they are using social media to get people to interact with understanding water issues, and then through that consumer interaction online, not through the purchase of the product, they are then donating money to water.org. And this is now an ongoing campaign between the corporation and the charity.
Iman, let me try this with you. Again, according to StatsCan, a third of Canadians donate in response to canvassing at a shopping center or on the street. And I don't know how often you walk down the streets of Toronto, but there are, if you go up and down Yonge Street, you can get practically chased around the block by people who are representing very legitimate and wonderful causes, but who, it looks like you're doing a 100-yard dash in some cases to try and get away from these folks if you don't have time to hear their pitch. What do we think of that in terms of trying to get people to be charitable under those circumstances?
Well, that obviously shows that there are needs out there to which we have not adequately responded, and obviously we need to give more as a total population. At the same time, when we're approached on the street like this, we wonder if this money is really going to the place where it is supposed to be going to. So one has to give in a situation in which one finds oneself, as much as the situation seems to demand. If we're giving to an organization that we know and we trust, obviously the bulk of our donations will go there. If we're giving to somebody on the street, it may be just a bare minimum to at least feel satisfied that we haven't said no to a good cause. We did what we can in that situation.
Mara, is it much more difficult to create a so-called culture of giving given the Great Recession that the world has gone through over the last 5 years?
Oh, gosh, yes. It becomes harder and harder when you think about, everything costs a whole lot more money, and people are concerned about what their own particular situations are going to be. It becomes harder and harder to look beyond yourself. I want to go back to a comment I made before about younger generation. I don't want to give the impression that I think that the younger generation is less caring. I think the younger generation is incredibly caring. I think the issue is that they have fewer and fewer outlets through which to express that caring, because they haven't seen that pattern for them. There's a great article called Compassion Without Action. And it looks at these kinds of ideas about how people have the feelings of wanting to be compassionate, about how they want to do good things, but they're not really sure how to do that. Add to that the Great Recession and the inability to be able to have certainly the funds to be able to give to other people, and that becomes sort of a double whammy. On the other hand, though, going back to the idea of volunteerism has expanded significantly because people have a whole lot more time, because a lot more people are unemployed.
I'm not sure if the concept of going viral was ever written about in the Quran or in the Bible or in the Torah, but that's where it's at today, folks. Everybody wants to go viral, and including charities. Let's take a look at this clip from ABC News that was broadcast back in June. Illustrates the spirit of giving, and then we'll talk some more. Roll tape, please.
68-year-old bus monitor Karen Klein met her anonymous benefactor.
Nice guy, and I'm very appreciative.
Klein became a public symbol for the abuse of bullying after this video showing 7th grade boys mercilessly taunting her on a school bus was posted online. Millions saw the video and responded. 25-year-old Max Sidoroff from Toronto, Canada, says he had to do something. He was once bullied too.
I know how it feels, and nobody should go through that ever.
Sidoroff set up this website asking for donations to send Klein on a vacation.
I don't think anyone expects anything like this.
His goal? Just $5,000. But in under a week, he raised $250,000. Klein has 8 grandchildren, one with Down syndrome. She says she will donate part of the money to support research.
An astonishing story. Simon, is this where charitable giving is headed?
I don't think it's headed there per se. It's a wonderful story, and wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago, for sure. And we can certainly put causes out there, but I think this cause struck a chord. One, because it was about bullying, which is becoming more noticeable in our society today. And there was the actual video of this poor woman being bullied. And that goes back to what I said about that we are naturally generous, naturally caring. So when people saw this, they had no choice but to, I would say, no choice but to react. If they could afford to give $10 or $20, they did. And it just shows how many people did react to that. Now, if this will be a trend in the future, we'll see more of it, I'm sure. But I don't think it'll be a big method of raising funds.
Dave, is this a trend?
Yeah, this points to something really interesting. The breakdown is roughly people respond to 60%. It's based on emotion, and 40% more on thoughtfulness. And the younger the person is, the more it's biased towards emotion. So that kind of social media thing is absolutely made for what appeals to people today.
Does that get you right in the heart?
It gets you right in the heart. And I think our struggle is, how do we on the one hand, admit that all of us respond emotionally. There's the urgent, immediate need, but when so many of the solutions that we're talking about actually take a longer period of time. And that's the challenge for many charities, certainly for us at World Vision, is how do we help people understand that and not simply be satisfied with the emotional payout for doing something really quick. I fed a child today, or I helped a woman who was bullied. As important, I never would want to say that's a bad thing, but that's the challenge that I think we're facing as we look at this.
Well, let me take it even a step further, and I don't want, Mara, let me bring you in on this, and I don't want to sound like I'm being overly critical of this guy, but again, we talked earlier in the program about a hierarchy of giving, where anonymous giving is the highest form of giving, and getting your name on the side of a building is a lesser honorable way of doing it. The guy who raised all that money for the woman on the bus was on every morning show, was on all the time. I mean, this guy, God bless him, he did a great thing, but he sure got his 15 minutes of fame. Is there an element of narcissism in this kind of charitable giving that you find somewhat concerning?
Yeah. Well, in this particular case, I certainly do. But I think on most of the sites where this kind of thing happens, there's something that parallels the viral issue, which is crowdsourcing. And there's the whole idea of crowdsourcing for good. And that's where people can go to individual sites and as a group donate little pieces so that they ultimately help someone, which I believe is where this kind of thing started. But on a smaller scale, it's websites like donorschoose.org, where people can choose a local school classroom, and they can donate $25 or $50 or $100, and that will help buy musical instruments or school supplies or whatever it is that that individual classroom needs. There's another one called hopemob.com, which also does the same sort of thing. But in those cases, people, you can be anonymous or as forthcoming as you want to be, and if you do happen to donate a lot of money to something like donorschoose.org, the school children will write you little thank you notes, which is really very lovely. But to do this in order to get your name or to appear on the morning shows, I think that sort of loses what you're trying to go for. Certainly what we were talking about in terms of religious charity at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, Shabir, this is a happy story, but on the other hand, how much are we willing to overlook the fact that somebody is basically saying, look at me, I'm a very charitable, wonderful, giving, kind, terrific person. It's not that they don't believe in the cause, but, and I'm not accusing this guy of doing it, but
yes,
some people want to be out there.
Yeah, I also don't want to judge the individual because
Yeah.
people think of things differently. It could be that he started out with a total sense of anonymity. He just wanted to help this woman. She was the focus. And then he became famous by doing this. People were interested in the story and interested in the man behind it all.
And you know those media, they're hard to say no to. Once they start asking for interviews, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yes. And even his appearance on the shows may be for the purpose of, in his own mind, to help others to think about doing such charitable things, and not necessarily for his own fame. But in religion, we are taught to give as much as possible in a secretive way. But we're also encouraged to give in a public way, and I'll explain that. First, the secret way is what most people know. A tradition says, attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, says, give with your right hand such that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is giving. So that's the secret giving. But then the Quran also praises those people who give secretly and also openly. Imam al-Ghazali, one of the greatest Muslim theologians in history, wrote in his book, The Revival of Religious Sciences, that in a public gathering, it is actually preferable to give publicly because then you will encourage other people to give as well, and so the outcome will be better. Obviously, the outcome from the point of view of the recipient. And so one needs to do both things. Give privately, sincerely for the sake of God, and only God knows that you've done that, but also give publicly so that, yes, a name is there in a hospital building and everyone gets the message that this is due to somebody's charitable donation, and perhaps I can, in my own way, give something for a charitable cause as well.
In our last 20 seconds, though, Dave, secretly, in the back of your mind, do you think a little less of somebody who's giving with the purpose of aggrandizing themselves and their reputation?
I think my first thought really is who's going to get the benefit? In other words, is there a starving child? Is there a community that's not going to get out of this if they do it, if somebody doesn't give it? I still think that has to be the focus of what we're talking about. And I guess what excites me about this conversation tonight is that we're of faith, some of us have not. But you know what? There's still 20,000 children dying every day. We don't need to change our faiths to get together to say, we got to do something about that.
I agree.
That's ultimately what this is about. And we have so much common ground together, and it's exciting to be able to talk about this and do this.
On that, we say amen. Mara Einstein, thank you for being there on the line from New York City for us, the author of Compassion, Inc., the professor of media studies at Queens College at the City University of New York. And back here in studio, Shabir Ali, the president of the Islamic Information and Dawah Center, Dave Toyson, president, CEO, World Vision Canada, Simon Parcher, president, Humanist Canada. Thanks so much, everybody.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.